So, are you afraid of colors? Is your colors muddy or chalky? Today we're going to tackle common beginner mistakes head on, and I'm also going to show you a 3-step approach to coloring your portrait in Procreate.
So let's say that we are going to paint this image here. And we would usually start with values because values is where the drawing and the design is. So usually we have a simplified version, so there's a lot of values. You can have at least 10 values, but usually we simplify it to about 3 or 4 values first, and it will look something like this. So this would be our value design with these 4 values. So now let's talk about the colors. For example, let's say I just want to copy the colors from the photo. Let's just pick the strongest colors from each of the areas. So that's the red, and I'm gonna pick the strongest blue that I can see, and also the color of the skin tone because it's different, and the background as well. So in a nutshell, these are the colors that is in the image, but every color comes with 2 other qualities, which is, other than the color, it comes with an inherent value and also the inherent chroma. So on top here we have the values, which are the 4 values that we designed to paint, which is the brightness of how bright or how dark the image will be. Then we also have the color, which is what hue it is, and also we have chroma, which is how gray it is. So let's talk about color and value first. So each hue has its own inherent value. So if I were to arrange all the colors according to the value here, those that are at the bottom is lighter, and then those on top are darker. So we would arrange it something like that. And then let's just create some like in-between swatches between all these colors and have a full palette first. So this is what we have now. The top part would be a hue scale, which is one color going from dark to light, and the bottom is a chroma scale, which is the color going from vibrant to gray. And this is necessary because we have like skin tones and this and that in the painting. Now, of course, if we were to use the palette to actually paint the painting, there will be a lot more in-between colors, like red plus the brown would be the skin tone, and then we can also like have like some purples in between the blue and the reds. So this is how we can expand the palette. So how do we go about using this palette to paint? Remember, we had a design of the 4 values. So we actually have to discover the colors for these 4 values first. So obviously the darkest value here is not represented by the colors at all. So we need more colors for this value, and also we can identify that the rest of the values are going to sit somewhere between here and here. So I can see that the value is actually correctly matched here because the colors seem to disappear into each other. So technically, because we only have 4 values, we only need about a couple of swatches to match the 4 values, right? So we need these extra colors. And if we want to expand the scale a little bit, we can of course get the in-between for these colors as well. But I would not recommend using this palette to paint because this is way too expanded. We have expanded for values, for colors, and also for chroma. And then don't forget that we need all the in-betweens as well, the purples and the oranges as well. So this would be a nightmare to paint, which is why we should not use this method at all. Now let's go back to the 3 components. The brightness, which are the values, is important because this is where our drawing is. So this is the most important. This is the structure and the bones of our painting. And hue itself, it can control style, and also you can recognize like subject matter through it, like certain flowers are pink and then some birds are blue. Now in a portrait, gray tones is very important because gray tones is where all the skin tone is. They are usually very gray, and especially in this image itself, the background itself is gray. So without grayness, you are gonna end up with a very vibrant painting, and it's gonna just hurt the eye. So gray tones are very important as well. So now let me show you the right way to create a palette for painting. So to create a palette for painting, we only need to transition from each color to the next without worrying about the values first, because that's already been decided in the value design. And you're going to want to transition between every color. So if you put it in a line like this, it's not going to work. So if you have 3 colors, make sure it's in a triangle like this. This way you get to mix every color with each other, and then you can see that there's an empty gap in the center of the triangle here. You can then expand it into the chroma scale then. Here I'm not even picking the gray tones that I picked up from the image. I just picked a gray from the value scale, and I used this to create like some gray tones in the center. Now with this palette itself, I can actually just recolor the entire value design and it will already look like the reference. Just take a look. So if you notice here, because of the value design, no matter what color you put in, it will actually still look reasonable. And knowing this, we are going to redesign our palette, redesign the value design as well, so that we can do something new, creative and original.
This painting was painted using my new noise brush pack, which is full of dreamy textures and also a perfect brush pack for this kind of workflow. So you can find this brush pack in the link here.
Alright, let's just start everything from the top again. I'm going to change the value design to be a bit more high contrast, meaning the darks are darker and the brights are brighter. So this is going to give a lot more impact to the painting. As for the colors, I'm going to just drop in some colors that are very vibrant first, so that I have a benchmark of what colors I want. Now it's time to decide on the shape of my palette. I'm picking a square palette here because I have 4 colors here, but I have 2 shades of blue, and I might not need a square depending on the palette that I come up with now. So in the end, I decided that I really don't need a square, and I just need a triangle with an extended blue scale. And this is how I got to the conclusion. Look at the light blue plus red and dark blue plus red. The resulting colors are similar, so I don't really need the dark blue to be part of the square at all. So after figuring out that this is the shape that I want, I am going to redo this entire palette, and inside the empty space, I'm going to do even more intermediary color blending. So now I have a palette that has a lot of colors for me to work with for my painting, and I'm going to just quickly duplicate this palette here into 3 copies. So I'm just going to select both of them, and using the hue saturation brightness tool, I'm going to lower the saturation and also increase the brightness. Actually, the brightness is really optional because it doesn't really affect the painting at all, but I just think that it looks nicer this way. So at the end of the day, I will have 3 palettes with different chroma, and I can just use these 3 palettes to color my entire painting with all the shades that I will ever need. So using the 4 values from the new value design, I've already painted the black and white version here. So if you see here, I've already labeled the layers with the number of the values. So you see here I have value 3, and then I have value 1 with a layer mask. Then I have 2 layers of value 2, and then lastly I have value 3 and value 4. So the step 1 would be to do the value design in the palette, and then step 2 would be to create these values and paint them, and now the last step is to color them. So we're going to color each value, which is each layer separately. So I'm just going to turn off all the layers first and focus on the most bottom one. And this is the basic setup for coloring. We are just going to create a new layer on top of this layer. Then we're going to change the blending mode to color. And that's it. This is our coloring layer. So we're just going to do all the color changes on this layer. Now watch what happens when I paint different colors onto this layer itself. You can see that it's changing the color, but the color that is changing is not the same compared to what I'm picking. So you can see that the blue is a lot more faint, and the yellows are grayer as well. So this actually is because the color blending mode is actually retaining the color that you are painting, but you are actually not imparting any values at all. Meaning you're only changing the colors, but any values that is on the layer below it is not going to change. So you can see here I'm changing the values, I'm making it darker, but it's not changing at all. You are just getting a more faint red. So this also means another thing. We are imparting the color and also the chroma, which means that if you are painting a red that is more gray, this is also going to show. Everything is being applied, the hue and the chroma is being applied except for values. Values is being ignored. So this means that the drawing is done, the value design is done. We just need to figure out the color and the chroma. That's just two things to figure out before we finish the painting. It's so easy. So usually when I start a coloring layer, I would pick one color and I would just drop onto the entire layer to get a rough base color going on. And I can just create another layer. I can stack as many of these coloring layers, just set it to color blending mode, and we can begin coloring again and again without affecting what we have so far. Now, because we're just starting out, we don't want to work with the most vibrant palette first. You can see here I'm picking from the most gray palette. So we don't want to start with the most vibrant because this can easily choke the entire contrast and vibrancy of our entire painting. So we're just going to continue to do that for every single layer. Like right now I'm turning on value 1 and creating the coloring layer using the same steps. And then after that I'm just going to pick colors for this shadow. As I'm creating and setting up the coloring layer, you can tell that I am applying a clipping mask here. So what the clipping mask does is it actually confines the coloring layer to the drawing that's below it. So you're going to have to do this for every layer that has any sort of drawing in it so that you can retain the drawing. So usually for a darker shadow, we can go more vibrant and have a lot more colors here because having vibrancy in the shadows is going to get some interest into this value itself because it's so dark. There's not much we can do for details, but we can put in more colors instead. For the next value, this is actually just a fog layer, and I'm just going to drop in a color here to contrast the grayness a little bit. Another great tool to use is the Hue Saturation Brightness tool to test out colors and chroma whenever you think that you need to experiment a little bit. Okay, now let's move on to the next value 2 layer. I'm just going to drop a color in and continue coloring the image. And as you proceed in this workflow, don't forget that you can also use the eraser and the smudge tool, and this is just any regular painting layer, right? So you need to be mindful of your brush strokes and have pretty brush strokes as well. Also, don't expect to get everything right the first time or in one layer. I'm usually going back and forth between all the coloring layers before I get to what I want. As you get to the highlights, you're going to realize that majority of the colors are not going to be here. Like if you're in highlights and you just dump in one base color, you can tell that it also almost looks done already. All the colors should be in the layers that comes before, like the shadows and the darker midtones. Another thing you're going to start noticing is that certain areas are too dark or too bright. So for these kind of issues, we are going to have to wait until the end to fix it. One more thing, this workflow is not supposed to speed up your workflow. It's supposed to make things easier for you. So don't rush through this and simply color thinking that it's just going to get a good result from that. You still need to control your strokes and have good brush strokes. Now for the last layer, which is the highlights, value 4, you notice that if I just dump one color in, it really looks done, because for highlights, what's important are the textures and not so much how vibrant or how colorful it is. So the work that needs to be done here is actually quite little. Once you have colored every single value layer, we are just going to create a new coloring layer above everything else and do a one-time overall coloring. Once you're in this stage, you realize that sometimes you don't really need the palettes anymore, and you can just pick colors from the painting itself to continue working on the colors. But what's important to note is that at this point, even at this point, you can just use about any colors in any of the areas and it will still hold up, like the whole painting will still look realistic. But what's important is the use of vibrant and chroma colors. There has to be a balance between them. So basically, the most vibrant colors will go in between values. So where different values meet each other, that edge itself should have vibrant colors. And when you're done with this layer, the last thing to do is to create one last layer in normal blending mode. Then we're just gonna do some repainting on this layer. So all the other colors that does not exist so far, or any changes to the values or to anything else that you would like to add that is out of the coloring realm, you can just do it now. So to do repainting, there's actually a few steps. So for example, let's say I want to paint yellow on this part. We actually have to match the yellow to the values that is currently there. So this needs to be a lot darker. So let's just pull it down diagonally. Do not go vertically or horizontally. So we try to go diagonally towards the dark shadows, and this is how we go darker. And then we can just try and push it down a little bit more to match the value. And once we have the correct value, we can then begin repainting. So for example, this part, let's say I want a pink on the blue patch. So this color. So in order to get that, I'm going to push it up for a brighter value and to try and match the value. And once I can match the value already, I can then use this to recolor that area if I want to. So here is how I match the values to get a more vibrant yellow on this area, but still the same value. And of course, there are also times that I just want to completely change the value itself. I wanted it brighter, so I can also do that as well in this layer. But you have to actually clearly know whether you're repainting or just putting in new chroma or new values. You have to be very clear on that. You can also start adding more layers to add highlights and shadows. So if you want to add highlights that is bright and has color, you can use overlay like this to add more vibrancy to your highlights here. And you can use the blending mode multiply if you want to add shadows. So in summary, the first thing you would want to do is to create a value design and then paint first in black and white using the value design. Then for each value, color them using coloring layers. Then we would lastly do a repainting to finish up the painting.
What other problems do you have with colors? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as usual, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I'm Haze, an artist and speed painter from Malaysia. Bye!